Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, uncomfortable horror, world conflict and teenage love. It's my weekly wrap-up. Before I get into the meat of the video today, I just wanted to highlight a video that Alex from the channel Alex Unabridged put up in the last week. I did share it on my community tab. So this is announcing a new project he is doing, a new publishing project. So Alex, you may remember, was the publisher of Trash Tales, the anthology of trashy fiction we published in August to coincide with this year's Garb August event. Alex is now doing a new series of small anthologies. I think there are going to be 4 stories in each anthology. That's a difficult phrase to say. The series is called Fun in the Dark, and he's asking for submissions for the first anthology. I think, if I remember rightly, the theme for it is transformations. So I'll leave a link in the description to this video to Alex's announcement video, but if you are a budding writer, definitely check that out. I think the word count he's after is between 2,000 and 5,000 words, if I remember rightly. And I'm very pleased to be a guest reader. So for each of these anthologies, Alex is going to have a guest reader who helps review the stories that come in. So I'm delighted to be the guest reader for Fun in the Dark, Volume 1. So yeah, really looking forward to that. And I think the plan is that these will be published quite regularly. So yeah, can't wait to read some of the stories that come in. And as I say, if you're a budding writer, do check out Alex's video for more information. Right, let's get on to what I've been reading this week. So I'm wearing my Occult Detective magazine t-shirt again because it is the second week of Occult Detective October, or rather we're at the end of the first week, about to go into the second week. So I haven't actually finished an Occult Detective book. This week I read my book for the first week. I read in the first few days and talked about in my wrap-up last week. So that was a Jules de Grandin book by Seabury Quinn. So that was for the pre-1960 week. For the post-1960 week, I'm reading a book called Moona over Soho by Ben Aaronovitch, but I've only just started that, so I'll talk about that a bit later in this video. In terms of things I've finished then, so the first of those is We Are Always Tender with Our Dead by Eric LaRocca, the first in a trilogy of books set in the town of Burnt Sparrow. I have put up a full review of this on the channel, so check that out if you want for more information. But this is basically a very unsettling, very uncomfortable horror novel. It has a couple of scenes or sequences in particular that were really very disturbing. But it also just has disturbing themes running throughout it in the background, which are really about society and how we treat people who are different from us and how we scapegoat people. It was, I thought, really well done. It's an effective horror novel, but also quite a thoughtful and thought-provoking book. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what Eric LaRocca does with the subsequent 2 books in this trilogy. So if you like that kind of slightly weird, unsettling, small-town horror, definitely one to check out. I've also finished something completely different. So the 3 books I finished this week could not be more different from each other, other than the fact, I guess, that they are all, broadly in the popular fiction category. So extreme horror, for want of a better word, the first one. The second one was a teenage romance, and kind of a book. It felt a bit at times, if I was being critical of this book, it felt like it was a public service information announcement packaged as a novel. So that book was Forever by Judy Blume, which I read for Banned Books Week. So it was Banned Books Week in the week just gone, and I wanted to read a book that has been banned or restricted in school libraries in the States. Forever by Judy Blume is one of those books in the last year, so it's in the top 10 for the last year, which is bizarre when you think that this is a book that came out in 1975, albeit it still feels very current in the themes it discusses. I suspect the reason why it's in the top 10 is there is a recent Netflix adaptation of it, so I suspect that has got interest, got teenagers fired up to read it again. And it was an interesting read. It was interesting for me to read it in particular because my sister was a huge Judy Blume fan when she was growing up, and I hadn't ever read anything by Judy Blume, so it was interesting to see what my sister had been reading back then. So this is a book about a teenage girl and a teenage boy, basically, about their relationship, about their first time, about contraception, about, you know, all those challenges of being a teenager and becoming an adult, you know, about that transition from childhood to adulthood and relationships and everything that goes with that. And it was well done. I did feel that the ending was quite abrupt, but it swept, but in a way that kind of made sense, I guess. And it definitely swept me along. It definitely kept me turning the pages. I was interested by what was going on. I will say, as I said before, it did feel like it was very, very heavily on wanting to convey certain bits of information to its teenage readers, but it did it in a very engaging way. Interestingly, there were some, for want of a better word, mechanical details. I don't know. There were some details in the book that to do with contraception that felt like they were very, very dated, and I was kind of surprised in a way that they hadn't been updated, because for a book that is trying to, as well as entertain, educate its readers, it felt maybe a bit of a misstep to contain information that is no longer accurate. So that was, I guess, would be a criticism of the book, but I still thought it was effective, and I can definitely see how it would be a good book for teenagers to read to, you know, prepare themselves for, you know, getting into relationships. So it was an interesting read, and as I say, very, very different from the other two books. So the third book then was, again, something completely different. So this was Protect and Defend by Eric L. Harry, which has the slightly weird glittery font on the cover. I can't make up my mind if that really fits the image of the military helicopter. So this was the book I'm reading this month, October, for the project where I'm buddy reading with my dad his 12 favourite books. This is a book about a war between China and the West. So this was published in the late 1990s. Let me double check. I think it was 97. Yeah, published in 97. And the scenario here is essentially is, so you've got a post-Soviet Union, pre-Putin Russia, basically. So that kind of period of time when Russia felt a little bit lost and it couldn't really figure out what it was going to be, and was a bit anarchic. And this book is about a Russian anarchist who is trying to, like, destabilise the world, basically, and effectively engineers like destabilising events, so political assassinations and things like that around the world, but also a Chinese invasion of Siberia. So the Chinese invade Siberia in order to kind of take its mineral wealth and things like that, and just expand the scope of China. And the Americans and various European allies decide that they're not going to stand for that, and they fight back. They help the Russians to fight back, albeit the Russian army in this is there's very few Russian soldiers in this. So it was an interesting concept, and really interestingly done as well, in terms of the fact that what Eric L. Harry does is, as is quite common in like big fat books like this, is he basically has a small cast of characters, so about 7 or 8 characters, and intersperses chapters about each of those characters. And what that allows him to do is give you quite a complete picture of the impacts of the war, but also just keep you turning the pages, keep you interested. So all of the characters I found I was interested in their plights. So there are some soldiers, there's a Chinese soldier, there's a couple of American soldiers from very different backgrounds, kind of very junior soldiers. There's an American general, there's an American politician who ends up being vice president, and then something a bit more than that, shall we say. There's a Russian emigre who was kind of a Russian agent who has fled Russia to live in America, and there's an American female journalist. So a real range of different characters. And as I say, all of their stories are interesting, and their stories intersect a little bit. So some of those character stories intersect, but many of them don't. But you still see the impacts of what one character has done on the lives of other characters, even if they don't ever meet. So I thought it was really effectively done, really gripping. It doesn't get too bogged down in kind of military detail. It's got a really nice mix of, as I say, character stuff and emotional stuff, and caring about the characters, but also kind of geopolitical detail. So a lot of stuff about the political motivations of the American politician, which I thought was quite tense and well done. And there's a lot of kind of political, not exactly intrigue, but, you know, he's having to justify what he is doing to the other people in his party. So quite a lot of kind of politicking in that sense. And then some kind of military strategy and some battle scenes. So a nice mix of different things. And I thought really, really effectively done. So I enjoyed that a lot. In terms of currently reading then, so currently reading two things for Occult Detective October. So the first of those, as I said, is Moon Over Soho by Ben Aaronovitch. So this is the second of the Rivers of London series. So about a young guy who's a policeman in London who ends up working for a department of the Metropolitan Police that deals with magic. So there are magicians around the place, and this department of the police deals with crimes relating to magic. And I've only read the first chapter, but it's really fun and engagingly done. There's quite a lot of humour. I read the first book like years and years ago, and right at the start of this book it refers to events in the previous book, so I had to kind of try and piece those pieces together in my mind. But Ben Aaronovitch kind of takes you by the hand a bit and leads you through that. But yes, nice humour so far, and already the start of a mystery. So the policeman investigating the death of this jazz musician who may or may not have had some relationship to magic. So yeah, I'm enjoying that quite a bit so far, and also really enjoying the other thing I'm reading for Occult Detective October, which may still turn out not to have been a good pick, but which is a good book, and that's Black Mountain by Laird Barron, which is the second of the Isaiah Coleridge books. So I am reliably informed that this series does end up being a bit occult detective-y, but I think probably 2/3 of the way through the second book in the series, and there hasn't been anything occult yet, but it's really great. So Isaiah Coleridge is this guy who's a detective in like New York State. He's an ex-mafia enforcer, and in this book he gets hired by the mafia to investigate the death of some people who work for them, basically, like a mysterious death that appears to be linked to a hitman who they previously employed. And Isaiah Coleridge is just a great central character. He's quite thoughtful. He's a little bit he's almost a little bit cliched and over the top, but in a way that's really, really entertaining. So he's a bit like, in some ways, a cooler version of Jack Reacher, in that he's super, super tough, but also super, super intelligent. But he's half Maori, so he's got a load of there's a load of kind of stuff about Maori culture and things like that woven into, and folklore woven into these books, which is really nicely done. But that also allows Laird Barron to comment on kind of racial politics in the US at times. But Isaiah Coleridge is also just, whereas Jack Reacher is kind of a bit of a goody two-shoes, really, Isaiah Coleridge is you know, he's an ex-hitman, so he's a much darker character and really, really enjoyable to read. The prose in this book is really, really fun. Some of the dialogue from the mafia characters is great. It's kind of, again, almost leans into cliche, but in a really, really fun way. So I'm enjoying this a great deal. It's had some fantastic action. It's got a good central mystery, some really interesting characters. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. So that is what I have read and what I am reading this week. What I'm currently reading. I don't know why I struggled to say that. So in terms of channel stuff then, so you had a couple of extra videos last week, and you're going to get one extra video in the week ahead as well, should you want it. So last week then you had my review of the Bigme Highbreak Pro Colour, which is a colour e-ink smartphone, which I've been using, which I really, really like. You've had a video where I talked about my process for cataloguing all of my physical books, which took me a while but was well worth it. And I may do a follow-up video to that in the future with some further things I'd like to add to the data that I'm keeping about my books, and also just how I keep that catalogue up to date. So you've had that, you had my September wrap-up, you had a review, as I've said, of We're Always Tender With Our Dead, and you had a video I did for World Mental Health Day, which was yesterday, Friday, talking about some of the things I've realised about my own mental health and the right way to approach it, I suppose, over the last couple of months. So that's what you've had in the week just gone. In the week ahead, you've got another e-ink video, so an unboxing video and kind of first impressions for a couple of new devices from Bigme. The first is the Bigme B6, which is a 6-inch super affordable colour e-reader, which is what I'm reading Rivers of London on, Moon Over Soho on. You're going to get a book, and then the Bigme B13, which is a 13-inch colour e-ink monitor. So quite a niche product, but a really interesting product. I've been using that for work this week, and I found it quite an interesting thing to have. I've definitely been enjoying using it. So yes, an e-ink video, then you're going to get an unboxing video. So a viewer very, very kindly sent me a box of vintage, like it's 1970s men's adventure paperbacks. So you get a video of me unboxing that. So thank you very much again for that, Matt. You're going to get my review of King Sorrow by Joe Hill, so that will be on Thursday. That book comes out the following week, and you're going to get a video of me talking about BookTube and something I have noticed about BookTube. So that's that's what you're going to get in the week ahead. That's me done for this week. So hope you've all had good reading weeks. Let me know if you're taking part in Occult Detective October and what you've been reading. But yeah, I will leave it there and say, as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.